Negotiators from the U.S. and Russia held a marathon round of talks to end Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine today. The Saudi Arabia meeting lasted about 12 hours. No word on any concrete agreement. To put all this in context, we're joined by a senior fellow from the Council on Foreign Relations, Charles Kupchan, for tonight's interview. Charles, good to be with you again. Give us your sense of what the parameters are of these negotiations and what both sides want as you see it right now.
Well, I would say that we are in a situation in which a ceasefire is plausible, but still far off. The call that President Trump had with President Putin last week was not encouraging. Putin didn't hang up the phone, but he also didn't make any significant concessions. We're now in a situation in Saudi Arabia where the Ukrainians and the Russians aren't even talking to each other. Yesterday, the U.S. met with the Ukrainians, today with the Russians. So we're still not in a situation where there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So far, I think what's happening is the negotiations have been necked down to focus on two issues. One is a deal on Black Sea shipping to stop warfare at sea. The other is a prohibition on energy infrastructure, which would be a significant step. But clearly there isn't broader agreement. So for now, they're looking at those two initial steps.
In an interview published in Time magazine, Vladimir Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, said, quote, "I believe Russia has managed to influence some people on the White House team." What do you make of his saying that, and do you see evidence of that?
You know, we have seen President Trump himself, to some extent, blame Ukraine for the war. We had the President Trump decide not to support a resolution at the UN that blamed Russia for the war. And it led Zelensky to say, you know what, I think the American president is getting Russian disinformation. Clearly, I think the narrative that has been embraced by the Trump administration is much more pro-Russian than it was under the Biden administration. That could be a sincere belief. It could also be a way of trying to curry favor in the Kremlin to try to get a deal out of Putin. But so far, it really hasn't shown much value because Putin is still putting out demands. Ukrainian neutrality, the end of Western arms shipments to Ukraine, recognition of Eastern Ukraine as belonging to Russia. These are poison pills. These are terms that the Ukrainians nor the Europeans are ever going to say yes to.
And we have a little less than a minute here, Charles. There's also Steve Witkoff, the president's negotiator, said there's a view within the country of Russia that these are Russian territories. He's talking about areas of Ukraine they've taken. And that's a White House official saying essentially a Russian talking point. What do you make of that?
You know, are there Russian speakers and ethnic Russians in those parts of Ukraine that are occupied by Russia? Yes. So there is some truth to the claim. Yeah. But the bottom line here is that Russian aggression against Ukraine has turned the lion's share of the Ukrainian people into Russophobes who want nothing to do with Russia or Russian occupation. In fact, we're seeing uprisings in the East. So this really is more of a Russian talking point than a assessment that bears, I think, resemblance to reality.